The massive form of Jupiter loomed against the star-speckled void, its swirling storms casting dancing shadows across the hull of the EDF Resilient. Captain Sarah Chen stood at the bridge's observation window, her dark eyes fixed on the gas giant's turbulent surface. 20 years of deep space operations had taught her to trust her instincts, and right now, every nerve in her body was screaming that something was wrong. "Captain," Lieutenant Marcus Rivera's voice cut through her contemplation. "We're picking up some unusual readings from the vicinity of Europa." Sarah turned from the window, her movement deliberate and measured. "Define unusual, Lieutenant." "It's—" Marcus frowned at his console, fingers dancing across the holographic display. "It's like nothing we've seen before. The energy signature is massive, but it's trying to hide itself. Our quantum sensors are picking up discontinuities in space-time that suggest a very large object, but our traditional scanners show nothing." Sarah allowed herself a small smile. The quantum sensors had been controversial when Earth first installed them on their ships. Too experimental, too unpredictable, the critics had said. But humanity had learned long ago that thinking outside the box wasn't just an advantage, it was a necessity. "Show me," she ordered, moving to the central command station. The holographic display flickered to life, showing a three-dimensional map of Jupiter and its moons. Europa glowed with an unusual purple hue, indicating the anomalous readings. Secondary confirmation coming in from the EDF Challenger and Dauntless. Communications Officer Yuki Tanaka reported. "They're seeing it too. Whatever this is, it's big." Sarah studied the display, her mind racing through possibilities. The Earth Defense Fleet had been patrolling the outer solar system for decades, watching for any sign of intelligent life. Now that they'd finally found something, it was trying to hide from them. And doing a poor job of it. "Send a standard greeting package on all frequencies," Sarah ordered. "Let's be polite first." The bridge crew worked with practiced efficiency, broadcasting humanity's carefully crafted first contact message into space. Minutes ticked by intense silence. The response, when it came, was overwhelming. Space itself seemed to tear open as a massive vessel materialized near Europa. The ship was enormous, easily 20 times the size of the Resilient. Its hull gleamed with an otherworldly metal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, and ornate patterns covered its surface in what appeared to be ceremonial decorations. "By all the stars," Marcus whispered. "That thing's bigger than anything we've ever built." Sarah kept her expression neutral, but her mind was already analyzing the vessel's design. Despite its size, something about it seemed inefficient. The ornate decorations weren't just for show. They were actual physical structures that protruded from the hull, creating unnecessary drag and weak points. "Captain," Yuki called out, her voice tense. "We're receiving a transmission. Full spectrum, multiple frequencies simultaneously. They're not being subtle. Put it through." The bridge's speakers crackled to life with a voice that seemed designed to inspire awe and fear. The words came in perfect English, suggesting their visitors had been watching Earth long enough to learn their languages. "ATTNTION, primitive vessels of the third planet. You stand in the presence of the glorious VEDRANI Empire. Rulers of 1,000 systems, and the masters of the cosmic tide. Your EXISTNC in this CCC2R, HASBEEN noted and EVALUATD. You world SUBMIT2 mediating integration into the Empire or face annihilation. A heavy silence fell over the bridge. Sarah looked around at her crew, noting the various reactions. Some seemed worried, others angry, but a few, including Marcus, were trying to suppress grins. Sarah cleared her throat. "Yuki, please open a channel." "Channel open, Captain." Sarah straightened in her chair, adopting her most diplomatic posture. "Vedrani vessel, this is Captain Sarah Chen of the Earth Defense Fleet ship Resilient. We appreciate your generous offer of integration, but I'm afraid we'll have to decline. We're rather attached to our independence." There was a pause before the response came, the voice now tinged with what seemed like confusion. "You dare refuse the benevolence of the Empire. Your primitive vessels cannot hope to stand against our might. Observe." The massive ship's surface rippled as weapon ports opened, revealing an impressive array of energy weapons. They began to glow with building power, creating a light show that was probably meant to be intimidating. Sarah noticed something else, though. The quantum sensors were going crazy, showing massive power fluctuations in the Vedrani ship's systems. They were diverting an enormous amount of energy to what appeared to be theatrical displays rather than actual weapon systems. She couldn't help herself. She laughed. The sound of their captain's laughter broke the tension on the bridge, and several crew members joined in. The Vedrani ship's weapons dimmed slightly, as if uncertain. "I apologize," Sarah said, not bothering to hide her amusement. Is all that light show really necessary? It must use up a tremendous amount of power. Our sensors indicate you're diverting enough energy to power a small city just to make your weapons glow pretty colors." Another pause, longer this time. When the voice returned, it sounded distinctly flustered. "Your NSOLENCE was noted. You goiled Iliaran respective for the proper protocols of space combat." "Proper protocols?" Sarah raised an eyebrow. "I wasn't aware space combat had protocols. Marcus, did we miss that memo?" "Must have, Captain," Marcus replied, grinning openly now. "Although I suppose we could make up some protocols. Maybe we should all agree to only fire our weapons while doing a little dance." The Vedrani ship's energy readings fluctuated wildly. "This is not how primitive species are meant to respond to the glory of the Empire. You will see this inappropriate behavior. MMEDATI." Sarah leaned forward in her chair. "I have a counter-proposal. You could turn off the light show, stop wasting power on ceremonial displays, and have a real conversation with us." Or she glanced at her tactical display, noting the positions of the other Earth ships that had quietly moved into position. "You could find out why humanity has survived everything the universe has thrown at us so far." The Vedrani ship's weapons fully powered up now, all pretense at ceremony forgotten. "You have made your choice. Prepare for fire," Sarah said calmly. The Resilience quantum torpedoes struck first, their warheads ignoring traditional defenses as they phased through the Vedrani ship's shields. The massive vessel shuddered as precise hits struck its primary power conduits, exactly where the quantum sensors had indicated they would be. The Vedrani ship's weapons discharged harmlessly into space, their targeting systems confused by the electronic warfare packages the Earth ships had been quietly deploying during the conversation. "All ships, execute attack pattern Chen 7. Sarah ordered. "Let's show our friends why humanity doesn't need fancy light shows to be effective." As the Earth ships moved into action, Sarah couldn't help but smile. The Vedrani Empire was about to learn an important lesson. Never mistake humanity's laughter for weakness. Sometimes, the ability to laugh in the face of overwhelming odds was the deadliest weapon of all. The Vedrani command ship listed to one side, its ornate hull plating scarred by quantum torpedo impacts. Around it, smaller Earth vessels darted through space like minnows around a wounded whale, their coordinated attacks precise and devastatingly effective. But Captain Sarah Chen knew better than to assume victory too soon. "Status report," she ordered, watching as the massive alien vessel attempted to regroup. "Their primary power grid is fluctuating," Marcus reported from his station. "But they're adapting, Captain. They're rerouting power from their ceremonial systems to strengthen their shields." "How innovative of them," Sarah remarked dryly. almost like they should have done that in the first place. The bridge crew chuckled, but their laughter was cut short by Yuki's urgent voice. "Captain, multiple spatial distortions detected. They're calling for reinforcements." Space rippled as 5 more Vedrani vessels materialized around their flagship. Each was smaller than the command ship but still dwarfed the Earth vessels. Their arrival should have been terrifying. Instead, Sarah found herself fascinated by what her quantum sensors were telling her. "Look at their formation," she said, pointing to the tactical display. "Perfect geometric spacing. Absolutely identical distances between ships. They're more concerned with maintaining their pattern than taking tactical positions." "Captain," Yuki called out, "they're broadcasting again." "Let's hear it." The same pompous voice filled the bridge, though now it carried an edge of irritation. "Your ARREVRENT TAC-TCs, HV 4CDUS, 2 CUMO and the CVE in heats, ceremonial battle group, observe the perfect harmony of our formation and despair." Sarah exchanged glances with her tactical officer. Are they serious? The amount of computational power they're using just to maintain that formation is incredible, Marcus confirmed, shaking his head. They could be using it for combat calculations, but instead, behold as we execute sacred battle maneuvers, through 10,000 years of imperial tradition. The Vedrani ships began to move in perfect synchronization, their massive forms weaving through space in what was undeniably an impressive display of coordination. Light danced between their vessels in carefully choreographed patterns, and their weapons charged in perfectly timed sequences. Sarah watched the display with a mixture of awe and disbelief. "They turned warfare into an art form," she mused. "Beautiful, intricate, and completely impractical." She keyed her comm. "All ships, this is Captain Chen. Execute Protocol Chaos Theory." The Earth fleet responded immediately, but not in any way the Vedrani could have predicted. Each ship began moving in seemingly random patterns, their trajectories following complex mathematical models based on chaos theory. To the Vedrani's rigid formation, it must have looked like madness. "Your ship is MOV without proper form or CE or MONY." The Vedrani commander's voice was scandalized. "This is not the proper way to conduct warfare." "There's your problem," Sarah responded, unable to keep the amusement from her voice. "You think war should be proper." She turned to her weapons officer. "Target their formation's focal points. Let's see how well they maintain ceremony when their geometry is disrupted." The Earth ships struck with precision, their quantum torpedoes phasing through the Vedrani's ceremonial shields. The perfect formation began to crumble as ships were forced to take evasive action, their crews clearly unprepared for warfare that didn't follow their ancient protocols. "Captain," Marcus called out, excitement in his voice, "I'm detecting massive power fluctuations in their fleet. They're trying to maintain their ceremonial systems while fighting, and it's overloading their power grids." Sarah nodded. "They can't let go of their traditions, even when those traditions are killing them." She opened a channel to the Vedrani fleet. "Your ships are overloading. Power down your ceremonial systems and focus on defense, or you're going to lose vessels." "Impossible," came the reply. "The sacred battle formations cannot be abandoned. It is written Imperial Combat Codex H8AT." The transmission cut off as one of the Vedrani ships suffered a catastrophic power failure, its ornate hull going dark as systems crashed throughout the vessel. The perfect formation finally collapsed as the remaining ships broke ranks to assist their stricken companion. "Hold fire," Sarah ordered. "Let's see how they handle this." The bridge crew watched in fascination as the Vedrani ships struggled to cope with a situation their ancient protocols hadn't prepared them for. Their movements became erratic, their responses delayed by what seemed to be constant consultations with their combat manuals. "This is almost sad," Marcus commented. Their technology is incredible, but they're so bound by tradition, they can't use it effectively. Sarah nodded slowly. And that's the cosmic joke, isn't it? They've spent thousands of years perfecting these elaborate combat ceremonies, never considering that they might encounter someone who simply wouldn't play by their rules. Captain, Yuki interrupted, I'm picking up internal communications from their fleet. There seems to be disagreement among their crews. Some are arguing for abandoning the ceremonial protocols. Now that's interesting. Sarah leaned forward. Record everything. This could be useful. The Vedrani ships had gathered around their disabled companion, their formation now completely abandoned. When their commander's voice came again, it was noticeably less certain. This is no t-p-ro-c-e-e-d-ing. ACQ ording to be a sacred textus. We are equest a temporary cessation of hostilities to consult imperial combat codex hor guidanceon. This in an precedent situation. Sarah couldn't help but laugh. By all means, take your time. We'll be here when you're ready to have a real conversation about humanity's place in the galaxy. As the Vedrani fleet hung in space, their crews presumably buried in ancient manuals, searching for protocols that didn't exist, Sarah turned to her bridge crew. Send word to Earth. Tell them we've made first contact, and that it's not quite what anyone expected. And the Vedrani? Marcus asked. Sarah smiled. Let them consult their codex. Sometimes the hardest lesson to learn is that not everything in the universe can be bound by ceremony and tradition. Humanity's greatest strength isn't our technology or our weapons. It's our ability to adapt, to think differently, and yes, to laugh at the absurdity of it all. The Earth ships maintained their positions, ready for anything but increasingly confident that they had discovered something important. In a galaxy of rigid traditions and ceremonial warfare, humanity's irreverence might just be their greatest asset. Deep in the shadow of Europa, Captain Sarah Chen watched her tactical display with growing interest. The Vedrani fleet had spent the last 6 hours in what they called ceremonial consultation, their ships arranged in a perfect hexagonal pattern, while they presumably searched their ancient texts for guidance. But something was changing. Energy fluctuations in the Vedrani flagship, Marcus reported, his fingers dancing across his console. They're powering up weapons, but differently this time. Differently how? They've reduced power to their ceremonial systems by 60%. It looks like they're actually learning. Sarah smiled. Well, that makes things more interesting. All ships, battle stations. The Vedrani commander's voice boomed across space once again, but this time it carried a note of determination rather than mere pomposity. We aficionado sacred texts and discovered an ancient protocol for dealing with unconventional adversaries. Prepare yourselves or the adversity of the adaptive combat doxyterine. Did they just? Sarah started. They found a protocol that tells them how to break protocol. Marcus finished, grinning. The irony is beautiful. The Vedrani ships began to move, their formation breaking apart into something more practical. Their weapons powered up without the usual light show, and their shields reconfigured to focus on protection rather than ceremony. They're actually adapting, Sarah mused. But they needed permission from their ancient texts to do it. Fascinating. She keyed her comm. All ships, initiate quantum dance protocols. Let's show them what real adaptation looks like. The Earth fleet responded instantly, their ship's quantum drives spinning up to full power. What happened next would have been impossible to follow without advanced sensors. The human vessels seemed to flicker in and out of reality, their quantum probability drives allowing them to exist in multiple potential positions simultaneously. Your ships, they defy the laws of space-time. The Vedrani commander's voice carried genuine shock. This is not Hiko Virid in ANYP Protocol. That's rather the point, Sarah responded calmly. Lieutenant Rivera. Execute attack pattern Schrödinger. The Earth ships began a complex dance through space, each vessel simultaneously existing in multiple quantum states. To the Vedrani sensors, it must have looked like they were fighting ghosts, never quite sure where their targets would actually be when they fired. Their targeting systems are going haywire, Marcus reported with satisfaction. They can't get a lock on our quantum probability fields. The Vedrani fleet's response was remarkable. They began to adapt their tactics in real time, but each adaptation seemed to require quick references to their combat codex. Their ships would move with sudden bursts of innovative strategy, only to pause as if seeking permission from their ancient texts. Captain, Yuki called out, I'm intercepting internal communications again. There's an argument breaking out among their command staff. Some of their younger officers are pushing to abandon the codex entirely. Sarah raised an eyebrow. Now that is interesting. Record everything. This isn't just a battle anymore. We're witnessing the beginning of a cultural revolution. The Vedrani ships attempted to coordinate their fire, trying to predict where the Earth vessels would materialize. But humanity's quantum drives operated on true randomness, making their movements impossible to predict. Each Vedrani volley passed harmlessly through quantum ghosts, while the real Earth ships struck from unexpected vectors. Impossible. The Vedrani commander's voice cracked with frustration. Your TCK-NOLOG cannot be more advanced than ours. We have 10,000 years of development. 10,000 years of development doesn't mean much if you never think outside the box, Sarah responded. While you were perfecting your ceremonies, we were asking questions like, what if we could exist in multiple places at once? The battle continued, but it was becoming increasingly one-sided. The Earth ships danced through quantum probability fields, their attacks precise and unpredictable. The Vedrani fleet, despite their attempts at adaptation, couldn't break free from millennia of rigid thinking fast enough to counter these tactics. Captain, Marcus called out suddenly. I'm detecting power surges in their weapons. They're trying to copy our quantum field technology, but they're doing it wrong. Their power systems can't handle the strain. Sarah leaned forward. Open a channel. When the link was established, she spoke quickly. Vedrani fleet, power down immediately. Your attempts to replicate our quantum fields without proper containment will cause a cascade failure in your systems. We cannot or to. The sacred TXTs, DEMND. Forget the sacred texts. Sarah's voice carried genuine concern. This isn't about protocol anymore. Your ships are going to explode if you don't power down now. There was a moment of tense silence, broken by a new voice on the Vedrani command channel. Younger, less formal. This is Sub-Commander Vex. I am taking emergency command under Provision 7.3 of the Imperial Combat Codex. In cases of imminent catastrophic system failure, ceremonial authority may be temporarily superseded. Sarah watched as the Vedrani ships powered down their weapons, their hulls dark except for essential systems. A ripple of relief passed through her bridge crew. A wise decision. Sub-Commander, she said. Perhaps now we can have a real discussion about the future of human-Vedrani relations. The sub-commander's voice carried a mix of humility and wonder. This is not how first contact was supposed to proceed. Our protocols, our ceremonies, they never prepared us for species like yours. Sarah smiled. That's because you tried to write rules for the unknown. We humans learned long ago that the best way to handle the unknown is to be ready to throw out the rulebook entirely. As the Earth fleet maintained their positions around the powered-down Vedrani ships, Sarah couldn't help but feel that they had achieved something more significant than a military victory. They had shown an ancient empire that sometimes the greatest strength lies not in following traditions, but in knowing when to break them. "Send word to Earth," she ordered. "Tell them the situation is under control, and that we might have just made some very interesting new friends. Once they get over their addiction to protocols, that is." The stars continued their eternal dance around Jupiter, indifferent to the drama that had just unfolded. But in the shadow of Europa, two civilizations had just taken their first steps toward understanding each other, not through ceremony or tradition, but through the uniquely human ability to adapt, innovate, and occasionally break all the rules. The relative peace following the quantum battle didn't last long. Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the Resilient, watching as hundreds of spatial distortions heralded the arrival of what could only be described as a celestial armada. The Vedrani Empire had sent their elite fleet. "Well," she said dryly, "I suppose we got their attention." The new arrivals made the previous Vedrani ships look modest by comparison. At their center was a vessel that dwarfed even the original command ship, its hull adorned with what appeared to be actual precious metals and gems arranged in intricate patterns that sparkled in the sunlight reflecting off Jupiter. "Captain." Yuki's voice was tense. "The new flagship is hailing us. They're identifying themselves as the Imperial Grand Armada, led by Grand Admiral Zexterra himself." "By all means," Sarah replied. "Let's hear what the Grand Admiral has to say." The voice that filled the bridge was different from previous Vedrani communications. Older, carrying the weight of centuries of tradition, but also a hint of genuine curiosity. "I am Grand Admiral Zexterra of the Imperial Grand Armada. I must admit, humans, you have provided us with something we have not experienced in over 1,000 years." Surprise. Sarah raised an eyebrow at the less ceremonial tone. "Grand Admiral, I'm Captain Sarah Chen of the Earth Defense Fleet. I take it you're here to discuss our unconventional approach to space combat." Indeed. There was an almost imperceptible note of amusement in the Grand Admiral's voice. "Though perhaps we should first address the fact that your species has been broadcasting what you call memes about our ceremonial combat protocols across all known communication frequencies." Sarah shot a look at her communications officer, who had the grace to appear slightly embarrassed. During the lull in combat, some of the Earth ships had apparently taken it upon themselves to create and distribute humorous images about the Vedrani's rigid battle formations. "Ah, yes," Sarah replied. "We find humor helps us process new situations. I hope you don't take offense." "Offense? Captain, you have caused more discussion and debate within the Empire in the past day than we have had in the past century. Half of our junior officers are questioning traditions they never dared question before. The other half are desperately trying to maintain order. And now..." The Grand Admiral paused. "Now you have forced me to come see this phenomenon for myself." The massive Vedrani flagship moved closer, its escort fleet arranging themselves in what was clearly meant to be an intimidating display of power. But Sarah noticed something interesting about their formation. "Your ships," she observed, "they're not in perfect geometric patterns anymore." "No," Zexterra admitted. "We have adapted. Though it pains many of my crew to admit it, your quantum probability tactics have proven that perfect formation is not always perfect strategy." Sarah allowed herself a small smile. "And yet you've brought such a massive fleet. Are we to understand this is still a combat situation?" "That," the Grand Admiral replied, "depends entirely on what you do next. We have analyzed your tactics, your technology, and most importantly, your transmissions. We have come to a rather startling conclusion." "Oh, you have been holding back." A heavy silence fell over the bridge. Sarah exchanged glances with her crew before responding carefully. "What makes you say that?" "Your quantum probability drives," Zexterra said. "They are far more sophisticated than anything we have encountered. Yet you use them primarily for evasion and precision strikes. The amount of power they generate could be used for far more devastating attacks. And then there are your communications. Our memes." Sarah couldn't help but chuckle. "Your entire information network." We have been monitoring what you call the Internet. Your species constantly shares information, adapts, creates, and most surprisingly, laughs at itself. This combination of technological capability and psychological flexibility makes you far more dangerous than you appear. Sarah leaned forward in her chair. Or perhaps it makes us valuable potential allies. Perhaps. The Grand Admiral's voice carried a new tone. Respect. But first, I must know, why hold back? Why not simply destroy our ships when you have the chance? Because that's not who we are, Sarah replied simply. Humanity has had its share of wars, Grand Admiral. We've learned that true strength isn't about destroying your opponents. It's about finding ways to turn them into friends. There was a long pause before Zexterra responded. An interesting philosophy. Very different from the imperial doctrine of absolute victory through overwhelming force. How's that doctrine working out for you? Sarah asked innocently. To everyone's surprise, the Grand Admiral laughed. The sound was rusty, as if it hadn't been used in years, but it was genuine. You see, this is exactly what has thrown our empire into such chaos. You don't merely defeat our ships, you make us question our most basic assumptions. Our young officers are already calling this the laughter revolution. Captain, Marcus interrupted urgently. Multiple quantum fluctuations detected. Their flagship. It's powering up something massive. Sarah tensed, but before she could respond, Zexterra spoke again. Do not be alarmed, Captain Chen. I am merely lowering our ceremonial shields completely, something that has not been done in the presence of another species for 10,000 years. Consider it a gesture of adaptation. The massive Vedrani flagship's ornate hull suddenly went dark, its decorative lights and ceremonial energy fields powering down for the first time in centuries. It was a powerful symbolic gesture, and Sarah understood its significance immediately. Well then, she said, smiling. Perhaps it's time we showed you what humanity's really capable of when we're working with someone rather than against them. The next few hours would change the course of galactic history, as two very different civilizations began the complex process of understanding each other. And it all started with a simple realization. Sometimes the most powerful weapon in the universe isn't a quantum drive or a ceremonial fleet. It's the ability to laugh at yourself and learn from those who are different. The rings of Saturn provided a stunning backdrop as the combined human and Vedrani fleets conducted their joint exercises. 3 months had passed since the first contact near Jupiter, and the changes in both civilizations were remarkable. Captain Sarah Chen watched from the Resilience observation deck as a Vedrani cruiser attempted, somewhat awkwardly, to execute a quantum probability maneuver. They're getting better, Marcus observed, standing beside her. Though I never thought I'd see the day when the mighty Vedrani Empire would take lessons from us primitive humans. Pride comes before a fall, Sarah replied, but wisdom comes after getting back up. The Vedrani ship finally managed to generate a stable quantum field, though not quite with the fluid grace of the human vessels. Its crew had spent weeks learning the principles behind human quantum technology, while Earth scientists eagerly studied the Vedrani's advanced materials and energy systems. It was an exchange that benefited both sides, though not without its challenges. Captain, Yuki's voice came over the comm. Grand Admiral Zexterra is requesting your presence aboard the Imperial flagship. He says it's time. Sarah nodded, though her communications officer couldn't see it. Tell him I'll be there shortly. She turned to Marcus. You have the bridge. Try not to start any revolutions while I'm gone. No promises, Captain. The junior Vedrani officers have developed quite a taste for Earth's comedy shows. The journey to the Vedrani flagship was short, her shuttle guided in by their newly simplified docking protocols. Gone were the lengthy ceremonial approach patterns and ritual landing declarations. As Sarah walked through the ship's corridors, she noted other changes. The ornate decorations remained, but they were now interspersed with practical equipment and monitoring stations. Grand Admiral Zexterra waited in what had once been the ceremonial chamber of supreme combat strategy. Now it was simply called the Strategic Command Center. The ancient admiral's uniform still bore the traditional medals and insignias of his rank, but his bearing was different, more relaxed, more open. "Captain Chen," he greeted her warmly. "Or should I say Ambassador Chen?" Sarah smiled. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves, Admiral. The official diplomatic corps will be arriving from Earth next week. I'm just here to make sure you don't fall back into old habits." "Old habits?" Zexterra chuckled, a sound that still surprised his own crew members. "Thanks to your influence, I have junior officers questioning traditions that haven't been challenged in millennia. The Imperial Combat Codex is being rewritten for the first time in 5,000 years. And just yesterday, I heard a squadron leader tell a joke." "The horror," Sarah deadpanned. "Indeed." The Admiral's expression grew more serious. "But that's why I asked you here today. The Imperial High Command has reached a decision about humanity's place in the galaxy." Sarah tensed slightly. Despite the progress they'd made, she knew there were still conservative factions within the Vedrani Empire who viewed humanity's influence as dangerous. And Zexterra activated a holographic display, showing a map of the galaxy. "We have controlled this sector of space for 10,000 years through force, tradition, and unwavering adherence to protocol. We thought this made us invincible." He paused, looking directly at Sarah. "Then humanity came along and defeated our best ships while laughing at our ceremonies." "To be fair," Sarah interjected, "they were very elaborate ceremonies." "Exactly," the Admiral gestured expansively. "Don't you see? That's precisely what we needed. For thousands of years, we've been slowly suffocating under the weight of our own traditions. We needed someone to show us that strength doesn't come from rigid adherence to the past. It comes from the ability to adapt, to laugh at ourselves, to change." The holographic display shifted, showing new territorial boundaries. "The Imperial High Command has voted to establish a permanent alliance with Earth, not as rulers and subjects, but as equals. Your quantum technology and our advanced material science, your adaptability and our experience, your laughter and our—" "What did your crew call it?" "Our extratum." Sarah couldn't help but laugh. "Admiral, are you saying the mighty Vedrani Empire is officially embracing meme culture?" "Let's not get carried away," he replied, though his eyes twinkled. "We're simply acknowledging that perhaps, after 10,000 years of taking ourselves too seriously, it's time for a change." The door chimed, and a young Vedrani officer entered. She snapped to attention, but her posture was noticeably less rigid than the old standard. "Grand Admiral, the quantum field training exercises are complete. The crews are requesting permission to yeet their ships through the rings of Saturn." Zexterra looked at Sarah questioningly. "It's a technical term," she said with a straight face. The Admiral sighed, but nodded to the officer. "Permission granted, but remind them that if they damage any of those ships, they'll be studying the original, unabridged Imperial Combat Codex as punishment." After the officer left, Sarah turned to the Admiral. "You know, when I took this command, I never expected to end up teaching an ancient empire how to loosen up. And I never expected to learn that the key to true strength isn't in maintaining perfect order, but in knowing when to embrace chaos." Zexterra gestured to the viewport, where human and Vedrani ships were now performing increasingly elaborate maneuvers through Saturn's rings. "Look at them. 3 months ago, my crews would have rather self-destructed than deviate from traditional flight patterns. Now they're inventing new ones." "The galaxy's changing," Sarah observed. "Thanks to you," the Admiral replied. "Though I must ask, did you really need to introduce them to something called TikTok? Consider it revenge for all those hours we spent learning your ceremonial ship-to-ship greeting protocols." As they watched the combined fleet's exercises, Sarah reflected on how far they'd come. The Vedrani had learned to laugh, to adapt, to question their assumptions. Humanity had gained powerful allies and access to advanced technology. But most importantly, both civilizations had learned that true strength comes not from power or tradition, but from the ability to grow, to change, and sometimes to just laugh at the absurdity of it all. "You know," she said thoughtfully, "there's an old Earth saying, the more things change, the more they stay the same." Zexterra nodded. "We have a similar saying in the Imperial Combat Codex, though it takes 3 hours to recite properly and requires ceremonial incense." They looked at each other for a moment, then both burst out laughing. Outside, the ships continued their dance through the rings of Saturn, writing a new chapter in the history of both their peoples, one quantum leap and one laugh at a time.